No, no, you don't understand. He can hear me. Grace's voice cracked as she backed away from the crib, her hands shaking. Marcus Holloway stood in the nursery doorway, frozen, watching his 6-month-old son, the baby 3 doctors swore was born profoundly deaf, turn his head toward the sound of her voice and smile. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. That's not possible. But there it was. His son. Responding. To sound. Grace looked at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. Someone's been lying to you. And I can prove it. In her trembling hand was a prescription bottle. A drug that didn't belong anywhere near a baby. And the name on the label made Marcus's blood turn to ice. 6 months ago, Marcus Holloway's life ended in a Georgetown hospital delivery room. His wife, Naomi, died 3 hours after giving birth to their son Liam. Marcus held her hand while she bled out, whispering, stay with me, until the monitor flatlined and the room went silent. Their baby was crying somewhere down the hall. Marcus couldn't move. 3 weeks later, Dr. Raymond Kepler, one of the top pediatric specialists in Washington, D.C., sat across from Marcus in his office and said the words that finished him off. Your son is profoundly deaf. Bilateral sensory neural hearing loss. His auditory nerves didn't develop. There's no surgery, no treatment. I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway. Liam will live in complete silence for the rest of his life. Marcus stared at the man. What does that mean? It means he'll never hear your voice. He'll never hear music. He'll never hear the world around him. I'm sorry. Marcus walked out of that office, drove home to DuPont Circle, and sat in the nursery he and Naomi had painted together. Soft yellows and warm grays, colors full of hope, and he broke. For 6 months, Marcus tried. God, he tried. He bought toys that lit up and vibrated. Rattles. Drums. A music box that played the lullaby Naomi used to hum. He'd hold them in front of Liam's face, shake them, desperate. Please, baby, please just look at me. But Liam's eyes stayed empty. Distant. Unreachable. Every night, Marcus would stand over the crib and whisper, I'm here. I'm right here. But his son never responded. Never turned toward him. Never knew he existed. The house died with him. Curtains stayed closed. The housekeeper quit. Then another. Then another. Marcus stopped going to his office on K Street. Stopped returning calls. Some mornings he'd sit in that yellow and gray nursery for hours, staring at nothing, wondering why God would give him a son just to make sure they'd never connect. His brother tried to visit once. Marcus didn't open the door. The 4th housekeeper lasted 2 days. The 5th didn't even make it through the interview. And then Grace Montgomery showed up. Now listen. I know some of you watching this right now are sitting in your own kind of silence. Maybe you lost someone. Maybe you're raising a child alone and you don't know how you're going to make it through the next hour, let alone the next year. Maybe you've been praying for something, anything, and all you're hearing back is nothing. I need you to stay with me. Because what happens next in this story isn't just about Marcus or Grace or that baby. It's about what happens when we stop believing God is listening. When we convince ourselves we're too broken, too forgotten, too far gone for a miracle. Grace Montgomery was nobody. A foster kid who grew up invisible. A housekeeper nobody remembered. But God didn't need her to be powerful. He just needed her to pay attention. So before we go any further, if this story is hitting you somewhere deep, if you feel like maybe you need to hear how this ends, hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For you. Because sometimes the stories we need most are the ones that remind us we're not as alone as we think. And I promise you, what Grace uncovers in that house will shake you to your core. Grace Montgomery stepped out of the Uber on a cold October afternoon and stared up at the brick townhouse on DuPont Circle. 4 stories. Black shutters. A wrought iron gate. The kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine, perfect and untouchable. She pulled her jacket tighter, gripped the strap of her worn duffel bag, and told herself the same thing she'd been saying for 3 years. Just work. Just survive. Just disappear. At 29, Grace had spent her whole life being invisible. 18 foster homes before she aged out at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a bone-deep exhaustion she couldn't shake. She'd cleaned hotel rooms at 5 a.m., scrubbed office floors after everyone went home, folded rich people's laundry in houses where no one bothered to learn her name. When she saw the ad on Craigslist, live-in housekeeper, private residence, $1,200 per week, room and board included. She didn't ask questions. She just said yes. Because sometimes you don't run toward something. You just run. The door opened before she could knock. An older man in a pressed shirt stood there, stiff, unsmiling. "You're the new housekeeper." "Yes, sir. Grace Montgomery." He didn't shake her hand. "I'm Charles. I manage the household. Follow me." Inside, the townhouse was spotless. Hardwood floors that gleamed. Furniture that looked like no one had ever sat on it. Fresh flowers on the table that smelled like a funeral. But the air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Like the whole house was holding its breath. Charles walked her through the first floor. Kitchen, living room, dining room. His voice flat and clipped. "Mr. Holloway works long hours. You won't see him much. He prefers it that way." Grace nodded, but her eyes caught on the photos lining the hallway. A woman with dark skin and bright eyes, laughing. The same woman in a hospital gown glowing, holding a tiny newborn wrapped in blue. Grace's chest tightened. "That's Mrs. Holloway," Charles said without looking at her. "She passed 6 months ago. Complications during childbirth." Grace's throat closed. "I'm sorry. Mr. Holloway doesn't like noise. Do your job, stay out of his way, and you'll be fine." He led her upstairs to a small room at the end of the hall. A bed. A window overlooking the street. Nothing else. "You start tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. Grace set her bag down. "Is there anything else I should know?" Charles turned in the doorway, his face unreadable. "There's a baby. Mr. Holloway's son. His name is Liam." Grace's heart skipped. "A baby? He's 6 months old. He's deaf. Completely. The doctors say he'll never hear. Don't try to talk to him. Don't try to interact with him. Just leave him be." And then Charles walked out, closing the door behind her. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bare walls. Somewhere down the hall, faint and muffled, she heard it. A baby crying. Then silence. Grace closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. What kind of house, she thought, feels this much like a grave? She didn't know yet. But in 5 days, she'd find out. And nothing would ever be the same. Grace's first morning started at 5:47 a.m. She made her bed, pulled her hair back, and moved through the townhouse like a shadow. Dusting shelves no one touched. Wiping counters that were already clean. The silence pressed against her ears like water. Around 9 a.m., Charles appeared in the hallway carrying a bundle wrapped in soft blue fabric. He set it down on a padded mat near the living room window, adjusted the edges, and walked away without a word. Grace froze, dust cloth in hand. A baby. 6 months old, blonde curls catching the morning light, lying perfectly still. His eyes were open, bright blue clear, but staring at nothing. She should have kept cleaning. Should have followed the rules. But something pulled her forward. Grace knelt beside him slowly, her knees touching the soft rug. "Hey there, sweetheart," she whispered. Nothing. She reached out, hesitated, then gently touched his hand. His fingers twitched. Grace's breath caught. She waited, heart pounding in her chest, then stroked his palm again. Soft. Deliberate. This time his hand didn't just twitch. It curled. His tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb and held on. Grace stared at their hands, her pulse roaring in her ears. His grip was weak, fragile, but it was there. Real. Intentional. "You felt that," she whispered. "Didn't you?" Liam didn't look at her. Didn't smile. But his fingers stayed wrapped around hers. Grace glanced toward the hallway. No one was coming. She stayed there for a long moment, watching his chest rise and fall, feeling his hand hold hers. This wasn't random. This was awareness. And if he could feel her touch, what else could he feel? Some of you right now are thinking, it's just a reflex. That's what they want you to think. But Grace knew better. She'd spent her whole life reading people, seeing what they tried to hide. And something about this baby was screaming the truth no one else wanted to hear. For 2 weeks, Grace became a ghost in that house. She cleaned. She folded laundry. She restocked the kitchen pantry with organic baby food that Liam barely touched. And every chance she got, she watched him. What she saw made her blood run cold. One afternoon while folding sheets in the nursery, she started humming. Barely a sound. Just a low melody her foster mother used to sing. Liam's head turned. Not much. Just a slight tilt toward her voice. Grace stopped humming. His head stayed still. She started again. He turned. Her hands stilled on the fabric. She tried it again. And again. Every single time, Liam turned toward the sound. Another day, October sunlight broke through the DC fog and spilled across the nursery wall in a golden beam. Grace was changing Liam's blanket when she noticed his eyes tracking the light as it moved across the wall. She froze. The beam shifted. His eyes followed. Grace grabbed a bright yellow rattle from the shelf, held it in front of him, moved it slowly left to right. His eyes tracked it. "Oh my God," she whispered. But here's what made her stomach twist. When Charles came into the room, Liam went blank. Vacant. Unreachable. When the nurse checked on him twice a week, nothing. No response. No movement. The boy became a shell. But when Grace was alone with him, he came alive. She tested it obsessively. She'd hum while folding clothes. He'd turn his head. She'd clap her hands softly behind him. He'd startle. She'd sing Amazing Grace in a whisper. His tiny body would relax. His breathing would slow. He could hear. Grace sat on the floor of her bedroom that night, her back against the door, her mind racing. The doctors said he was deaf. Profoundly, permanently deaf. But everything she was seeing told a different story. So why was everyone so convinced he couldn't hear? And why did Liam only respond when no one else was watching? Grace found it on a Thursday. She was putting away Liam's freshly laundered clothes in the nursery closet when her hand brushed against something hard wedged behind a stack of folded blankets. A bottle. Amber glass. Prescription label. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out and read the label. Opticom solution, 15 milligrams for post-surgical auditory nerve suppression adult, use only Dr. Raymond Kepler, Georgetown Medical. Grace's heart stopped. Auditory nerve suppression. She read it again. And again. Her hand started shaking so hard she almost dropped the bottle. This drug wasn't for babies. It wasn't for children. It was for adults recovering from ear surgery, a medication designed to temporarily suppress hearing during the healing process. And someone had been giving it to a 6-month-old. Grace's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the nursery floor, staring at the bottle in her hand. Someone was keeping this baby deaf. On purpose. Her mind raced. The way Liam only responded when she was alone with him. The way he went blank and distant when others were around. The way his behavior didn't match his diagnosis. He wasn't born deaf. He was being made deaf. Grace looked up at the crib where Liam was sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling, his face peaceful and unaware. Her throat closed. Who would do this? And why? She thought about the doctor's name on the label. Dr. Raymond Kepler. The same doctor who diagnosed Liam. The same Dr. Marcus trusted completely. Grace stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and tucked the bottle into her jacket pocket. She had to tell Marcus. But would he even believe her? She was a housekeeper. A nobody. And Dr. Kepler was one of the most respected pediatric specialists in Washington, D.C. Grace walked to the window and stared out at the street below, her reflection pale in the glass. God, if you're listening, she prayed silently, I'm going to need you to show me what to do. Because I can't let this keep happening. Outside, the streetlights flickered on as the sun set behind the monuments. Grace pulled the bottle from her pocket and stared at it. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Grace waited 3 days. 3 days of watching Marcus come home late, barely look at his son, and disappear into his study with a glass of bourbon. 3 days of holding that bottle in her pocket like a grenade. 3 days of praying for the courage to speak. On Sunday night, she found him in the kitchen. Marcus stood at the counter, tie loosened, staring at nothing. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Grace's hands were shaking. Mr. Holloway? He didn't turn around. It's late, Grace. I know. I'm sorry. But I need to show you something. Not tonight. It's about Liam. That got his attention. He turned slowly, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. What about him? Grace pulled the bottle from her pocket and set it on the counter between them. Marcus stared at it. What is that? I found it in Liam's closet, hidden behind his blankets. He picked it up, read the label. His face didn't change. It's medication. It's auditory suppression medication, Mr. Holloway. For adults. After ear surgery. It temporarily shuts down hearing. Marcus looked at her, his expression unreadable. I don't understand. Grace's voice cracked. Someone's been giving this to your son. That's why he doesn't respond. That's why he seems deaf. Because this drug is making him deaf. The silence that followed felt like falling. Marcus set the bottle down carefully. That's not possible. I've been watching him for 2 weeks. When I'm alone with him, he responds to sound. He turns toward my voice. His eyes follow movement. He hears me, Mr. Holloway. Marcus's jaw tightened. Dr. Kepler diagnosed him. 3 specialists confirmed it. Dr. Kepler's name is on that bottle. Marcus froze. Grace stepped closer, her voice shaking. I know you don't know me. I know I'm just the housekeeper. But I'm begging you, test him. Play music. Clap your hands. Watch what he does when no one else is in the room. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked out. Grace stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding, wondering if she just made the biggest mistake of her life. Listen. Some of you watching this are thinking Grace should have kept her mouth shut. Stayed invisible. But here's the thing about the truth. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And sometimes God puts us in impossible positions, just to see if we'll choose courage over comfort. Grace didn't have power. Didn't have a voice. But she used the one thing she had, her eyes. Don't skip what happens next. Because Marcus is about to see something that will destroy him. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until 3 a.m., staring at the prescription bottle on his desk. The label blurred in his vision. Dr. Raymond Kepler. The man who'd held his hand in the hospital. Who'd promised he'd take care of Liam. Who'd looked him in the eye and said, I'm so sorry. Your son will never hear. At 6:15 a.m., Marcus walked into the nursery. Liam was awake, staring at the ceiling. Marcus stood over the crib, his heart hammering in his chest. Liam, he whispered. Nothing. Marcus's throat tightened. Of course nothing. He was deaf. 3 doctors said so. But then he remembered Grace's words. When I'm alone with him, he responds. Marcus glanced at the door. The house was silent. Charles wasn't up yet. Grace was downstairs. He was alone. Marcus picked up the small music box from the shelf, the one Naomi used to wind up every night. He turned the key slowly, and the lullaby began to play. Soft. Fragile. A melody that used to fill this room with hope. Marcus held his breath. Liam's head turned. Just slightly. Toward the sound. Marcus's hands started shaking. He moved the music box to the other side of the crib. Liam's eyes followed. Oh my God, Marcus breathed. He set the music box down and clapped his hands once. Soft. Liam startled. Marcus clapped again. Liam flinched, his tiny body jerking at the sound. The room spun. Marcus gripped the edge of the crib to steady himself, his vision blurring with tears. His son could hear. His son could hear. All this time. 6 months of grief, of silence, of believing his boy was locked away in a world Marcus could never reach, and it was a lie. Marcus sank to the floor, his back against the crib, and covered his face with his hands. Someone had done this. Someone had stolen 6 months of his son's life. 6 months of his life. And the person responsible had a name. Marcus stood, walked to his study, and picked up his phone. He didn't call Dr. Kepler. He called his lawyer. David. It's Marcus Holloway. I need you to pull every medical record, every prescription, every piece of documentation connected to my son. I need it today. He hung up. Then he walked back to the nursery, picked up his son for the first time in weeks, and held him close. I'm so sorry, Marcus whispered into Liam's soft hair. I'm so sorry. Liam grabbed his father's shirt and held on. And for the first time in 6 months, Marcus Holloway felt his son respond. The records came 3 days later. Marcus sat in his study with his lawyer, David Chun, and spread the documents across the desk. Medical charts, prescription logs, diagnostic reports, insurance claims. David pointed to a highlighted section. This is the original hearing test from Georgetown Medical, 3 weeks after Liam was born. Marcus scanned the page. It says the test was inconclusive. Right. Not failed. Inconclusive. That means they couldn't confirm he was deaf. They needed to retest. So why did Dr. Kepler tell me he was? David pulled out another document. Because 2 days later, Dr. Kepler submitted a diagnostic report stating Liam had bilateral sensory neural hearing loss. Permanent and irreversible. But here's the problem. There's no secondary test on record. He diagnosed your son without confirming the results. Marcus's hands clenched. Why would he do that? David's jaw tightened. I pulled Dr. Kepler's research grants. He's been running a clinical trial on auditory nerve regeneration in infants. Federally funded. Millions of dollars. The air left Marcus's lungs. What? He needed test subjects. Babies diagnosed with permanent hearing loss. David looked at Marcus. Your son wasn't sick, Marcus. He was useful. Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You're telling me he diagnosed my son as deaf so he could use him for research? I'm telling you the timeline matches. The Opticom prescription was filled the same day Liam was diagnosed. And according to these logs, he's been receiving doses every 3 days for the last 6 months. Marcus felt the room tilt. He gripped the edge of the desk. There's more, David said quietly. I found payments. Cash deposits into an offshore account linked to Dr. Kepler. $250,000 over the last 6 months. The funding source is buried, but it traces back to a pharmaceutical company developing auditory drugs. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. He sold my son. David didn't answer. Marcus looked at the photo on his desk. Naomi holding Liam in the hospital, her face glowing with joy, hours before she died. He picked up his phone. What are you doing? David asked. Calling the police. Marcus, wait. My son was poisoned for 6 months. I want that man arrested. David stood. If you go to the police now, Kepler will know we're onto him. He'll destroy evidence. We need to be smart about this. Marcus's hand trembled on the phone. Then what do I do? We build a case. Airtight. Medical malpractice. Child endangerment. Fraud. We make sure when we move, he can't run. Marcus set the phone down slowly. How long? He asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Marcus looked toward the hallway, where Grace was singing softly to Liam in the nursery. He doesn't get another day, Marcus said. Not one more day near my son. David nodded. Then let's bury him. Marcus called Dr. Kepler's office the next morning. This is Marcus Holloway. I need to schedule an appointment for Liam. Today if possible. The receptionist hesitated. Is everything all right, Mr. Holloway? I just want Dr. Kepler to check his progress. Make sure everything's on track. 2 hours later, Marcus walked into Georgetown Medical with Liam in his arms and Grace by his side. Dr. Kepler met them in his office, smiling warm, the same man who'd held Marcus's hand in his darkest moment. Marcus. Good to see you. And this must be the new housekeeper. Grace nodded, her face carefully blank. Dr. Kepler reached for Liam. Let me take a look at him. Marcus held his son tighter. Actually, I wanted to ask you about his medication. Dr. Kepler's smile faltered. Medication. Marcus pulled the amber bottle from his pocket and set it on the desk. The air in the room changed. Dr. Kepler stared at the bottle. Where did you get that? From my son's nursery. Hidden in his closet. Dr. Kepler's face went pale. That's not what you think. What is it, Dr. Kepler? Marcus's voice was ice. Because the label says it's auditory suppression medication. 4 adults. After surgery. There must be some mistake. My son can hear. Marcus stepped closer. I tested him myself. He responds to sound. To music. To my voice. Which means he was never deaf, was he? Dr. Kepler stood, his hands raised. Marcus, listen to me. How much did they pay you? Silence. How much? Marcus's voice cracked. How much was my son's life worth? Dr. Kepler's face crumbled. You don't understand. The research, we're so close to a breakthrough. If we can regenerate auditory nerves, we could cure deafness. My son wasn't deaf. The trial needed control subjects, children with confirmed hearing loss. Marcus's fist slammed onto the desk. So you created one. Dr. Kepler flinched. Grace stepped forward, her voice shaking. You poisoned a baby. For money. Dr. Kepler looked at her, then back at Marcus. I never meant. I thought, after your wife died, you weren't bonding with him anyway. Marcus lunged. David grabbed him, held him back. Marcus. Don't. Dr. Kepler backed toward the door, his hands shaking. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Marcus pulled out his phone and hit play. Dr. Kepler's voice filled the room. The trial needed control subjects, children with confirmed hearing loss. Dr. Kepler's face went white. I recorded everything, Marcus said quietly. Every word. David stepped forward. Dr. Raymond Kepler, you're being sued for medical malpractice, child endangerment, research fraud, and conspiracy. The police are waiting outside. Dr. Kepler staggered backward, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't breathe. 2 officers entered the room. Dr. Kepler, one of them said. You need to come with us. As they led him out in handcuffs, Dr. Kepler looked back at Marcus one last time. I'm sorry, he whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He held his son close and walked out. 3 months later, the trial was over. Dr. Raymond Kepler was convicted on all counts. 15 years in federal prison. Medical license revoked. His research funding pulled. The pharmaceutical company that paid him faced a federal investigation. Marcus stood on the steps of the D.C. courthouse with Liam in his arms and Grace beside him, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. But Marcus didn't hear any of it. Because in his arms, Liam was giggling. Really giggling. At the sound of the wind. At the birds. At his father's voice saying, We're going home, buddy. That night, Marcus sat in the nursery, the room Naomi had painted with so much hope, and watched Grace rock Liam to sleep, singing softly. You saved him, Marcus said quietly. Grace looked up, her eyes tired but warm. No. God saved him. I just paid attention. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. You believed me when it mattered. Liam stirred in her arms, his tiny hand reaching up toward Grace's face. She smiled and kissed his palm. Marcus watched them and felt something he hadn't felt in almost a year. Peace. Will you stay? He asked. Not as a housekeeper. As family. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You mean that? Liam loves you. And so do I. Grace looked down at the baby in her arms, the boy who'd given her a purpose when she thought she had none, and nodded. I'll stay. That night, for the first time since Naomi died, the house on DuPont Circle was filled with sound. Liam babbling. Grace humming. Marcus laughing. The silence was gone. And in its place was something Marcus thought he'd lost forever. Hope. If you've watched this far, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I asked, but because stories like this remind us that even in our darkest moments, when we think God's forgotten us, when we think we're too broken to matter, He's already moving. He's already sent someone. Someone invisible. Someone overlooked. Someone who refuses to walk away. Grace was a foster kid nobody wanted. But God used her to save a child nobody believed could be saved. So if you're feeling invisible today, forgotten, like your voice doesn't matter, remember this story. And remember that sometimes the people the world overlooks are exactly the ones God chooses to change everything.